What happens when you strip a person of their autonomy, rewire their identity, and call it love? In this episode, we're talking to author Lesley Camphouse about Eternal Wives, a novel that drags you deep into the heart of a cult where brutality is dressed in devotion. From the real-life inspiration behind its hierarchy to how she crafts horror that pushes readers past their comfort zones, Lesley shares what it takes to write stories that stick under your skin. So without further ado, I give you Lesley Camphouse. Lesley, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on this first day of May 2025. I came across your work through a talented young book talker named Veronica, shout out to Veronica, who was reviewing your book Support Buddy. And I love extreme horror authors who push the envelope. And when I saw your most recent work, Eternal Wives, I had to check it out. What I found was a tale of brutality that pushed boundaries with its slow escalation of creative violence, each step defying expectations of what could possibly be worse than the last. It was as timeless as it was timely, so thank you for joining me on the show today to discuss this amazing work.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, so let's see here, just kind of a brief synopsis. The book follows a young woman named Ophelia who meets a man named Ezra, the most attractive, well-traveled, and well-read man she's ever encountered. He lures her into his lair with talk of a polyamorous lifestyle and a community of like-minded women, but she quickly discovers that what he's actually created is a brutal sex cult designed to break women like wild horses into a quivering state of servitude and submission to satisfy his sick, sadistic urges. And that is where the story begins. So, what inspired the brutal cultic structure at the heart of Eternal Wives? Was there a particular event or concept that sparked the idea?
Not particularly, to be honest. My husband actually told me, we were talking about the books I've written so far, and at some point he was like, you know what, you should do something with sister wives. And I was like, oh, that's actually pretty interesting. Like, I can do something about that. And I myself actually moved to a small town here, which is mostly Reformed. So I now live in a Bible Belt. And where I live, everybody's pretty relaxed. But like, if you go to one town further, everybody's wearing like gray skirts. Like all the women are having their hair tied in buns and everything. And I also used to watch a lot of Sister Wives, the shows with Amish people, that sort of thing. So I kind of took it from there, but then made it worse.
Yeah, for some reason, I was thinking of Sister Wives being some sort of like an archetype or a concept. I did not know it was actually a show, and I
used to watch it on TLC.
Just looking it up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said it was what now? It was Mormons?
I have no idea what they are, to be honest. I just like to watch it. It was just entertaining for me.
Oh, so it was like a polyamorous thing, like this guy right here?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so you have him, and those are his 4 wives.
Okay.
And there also you have the hierarchy of this is the first wife, this is the second wife. A new wife joins in the shows, etc. So you follow that whole dynamic and how it shifts and everything. So with that in mind, I created something worse.
Gotcha. Okay, well, now I'm going to have to ask my wife about that. She watches television. I don't. I just can't. I don't know why. I just can't get into TV. I'll watch movies,
Hmm.
but I can't commit myself to like a long series.
Oh, but this was
I don't know.
years ago. I think I watched this like, I don't know, like maybe 10 years ago or something.
Oh, but I'm
So
sure
it's
it's
been a
probably still
while.
available. It's
Yeah,
probably available on
yes.
streaming, right?
Oh, for sure. I think it's what you just showed. It had like 19 seasons, so I'm sure it's probably still being aired somewhere.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, circling back to the book, the novel does not shy away from extreme graphic content. Were you attempting to avoid the line between horror and exploitation, or is crossing that line part of the point?
I honestly didn't think it through that much, so I don't really plot when I write. I
Total
just,
pantser.
for sure, yeah, 100%. I don't even know how a book ends until I'm writing it.
I like that. That's cool.
So I just have some sort of idea in my head, and then sentences start to form, and I just have to write it down somewhere, and from there I'll take it. So not per se. So I didn't really thought through whether it was looking at certain directions, or I didn't think about it that deep, to be honest.
Well, the way you're talking, it's not uncommon to hear people say that they feel like they're not writing, like it's just coming through them. And a way I really heard it very uniquely put was, you know who Robert Rodriguez is? Desperado, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, Sin City.
Oh, yes.
He directed, wrote, scored all those movies.
Mm.
And I was watching him on a podcast being interviewed. And he was talking about how he felt like, it's not him. He's just kind of a medium, so to speak. He said it's like dialing in a radio. And as soon as you hit that station, it just comes through. Is that what you kind of feel like, the muse? And
I think that's a great description. For me, it's just like it just flows. Like I don't really think things through. Like I have some sort of beginning and ending that I kind of want to go at. So far, I've never reached the ending that I thought about. It always becomes something completely different. And with this book, same thing. I had a certain thing in mind. I wanted Ophelia and Hannah to have like a happy ending. I thought that Ophelia deserved it after all the ordeals that she went through. And while I was writing, I was kind of like, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You definitely
we're going to
deserve
have to
it,
change
but
this up.
because the thing for me is like when I write, I like to think from the character's perspective. That might sound a little bit strange. So while I write, I get to know my characters much better. So even though if I think about certain things, the more I get to know them, the more I'm like, you would never do that. You
Uh,
would not do that. And I kind of had the same with Hannah. I was like, no, I feel like you need a different direction. So I gave her a different direction.
yeah, definitely. Do you feel guilty for what you did to Ophelia?
No, not at all. I never do. It's more
I
like,
love it. You
like
savage.
it's like, wrong time, wrong place.
Uh-huh.
Should have thought it through before you went with a stranger. I mean, come on.
Right. Yeah. Well, the cult's use of ritual mutilation and forced conformity is grotesque yet organized.
Mhm.
How much of this world building was rooted in research versus invention?
So most of it is on invention. Like I just said, so I do have some of the basics. Like I said, from Sister Wives, that you see the hierarchy there. So I thought that was a good one, and I assume, because I don't know, I assume that there's always some sort of hierarchy in those sort of things. So that made most sense to me. Because of course it's more evil rooted. I figured you can only have that if you're like in a cult. If I mean people follow you for a reason, and if you look at documentaries about cults, it's usually there's always some sort of abuse involved. But then I thought, let's make it extreme because it is an extreme horror. So yeah, I literally thought, let's whip her into shape.
Yeah. As far as, and not to give away any spoilers, but as far as some of the specific things that are done, like I just had Chris Panettiere on the show, who wrote a psychological horror book where a woman kind of goes undercover into a mental institution, and he researched like some old implements, like treatment modalities that they definitely don't use anymore because they were just cruel and unusual. So like as far as that type of stuff that was involved, did you do any kind of...
I did look up more old forms of torture. So some things I looked up, but majority just came from my head, which is probably also not a good thing. But
No, it's a great thing.
but I did think of certain things like what their surroundings are. So, for example, I mean, they have this compound, they have this land. I mean, how do you get your food? You hunt. What do you use for hunting? So I thought about it more in that sort of directions. Like, it's a little bit more old school, I would say. So I looked at it more from that perspective, but I didn't do any deep research for this at all. I actually haven't for any of my books, to be honest. So most of it is either because I came across something and I was like, oh, I can work with this, or it's just I like to be creative with what I do.
Well, what little research you did do, did you clear your browser history?
Man, if they ever come here, I'm screwed.
The greatest writers have the worst browser histories. I think more writers need to utilize a VPN.
They should. I should know because that's my work background, but I actually don't use it myself.
Oh, you do like cybersecurity?
Sort of in that direction, more on the illegal internet content kind of side. So.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I should know better.
Not consuming it. No.
For work.
Gotcha.
So I should know better, but I actually don't do it myself. Maybe also because I know how the laws work in the Netherlands, so I'm not that worried.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Well, have any reader reactions surprised you, either in their praise or discomfort?
Definitely that it's received so well because it's different from my previous 3 books. I feel with my other 3 books, there's a lot more focus on, I would say, sexual violence. And with this one, I try to refrain from that. I mean, there is hints at it, but there's no actual graphic description of it. And it was interesting to me to see that people actually picked up on that they felt like this was different from the previous 3, but people still actually enjoyed it. So each book that I release, I always worry like people are going to hate it. They have to hate it. So I was surprised at the positive response, and I was also actually positively surprised that people actually picked up on that I made a conscious decision to actually do this one differently. So it has a more focus, I feel, on a story. So it's still abusive, but I took out the one thing that is almost a given when you abuse a female.
Well, Malvina, now she is a very interesting character. She's not just a victim or a villain. She's something in between. How do you personally view Malvina? Is she a believer, a survivor, or something else entirely?
I still feel that she's a villain, but I do always like to give my villain, so to say, some sort of traits that make people feel some sort of maybe still feel sorry for an individual, like, that they kind of understand where they are coming from. So that doesn't really justify their actions. But still, even though if you don't want to, you still can kind of understand where they're coming from. So I think in her case, it's also largely being indoctrinated by Ezra. She's his first wife. I would say that she probably met him very young, maybe 16, 17 years old. I would say maybe now she's like in her 40s, 50s, something like that. So that's a very long time to be brainwashed, I would say. But still, it's also an active choice to hurt another person. So therefore, for me, she's still a villain.
So a very morally gray character.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what drives her loyalty to Ezra? I mean, even as she enacts and endures unspeakable violence, it's bizarre. Is it love, fear, indoctrination, or power?
I would say indoctrination. I think, especially if you've been with a certain individual for so long, and that's the only thing that you actually really know as love, I think as human beings, we are inclined to go far for that. And I think you see those examples also in real life. If you look at, for example, again, a document for cults that, for example, everybody commits suicide, for example, all because their leader tells them this is the way to go. And I mean, people do it because they genuinely believe that this is the right thing. So even though she endures that much violence, she also undergoes it because she truly believes that he will always do what's best for her.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what was the last cult that had a mass suicide. The last one I remember was the Heaven's Gate cult. That was in the US. I'm not familiar with the Netherlands, Europe, anywhere. Do you know off the top of your head?
I think it's mostly in US.
more
because you guys have a large population and you have a lot of quieter areas. Like the Netherlands is so dense when it comes to population. Like it's nuts. Like we dream of a garden that's like 10 meters deep. For you guys, that's not even your front yard. So that's more what I meant with, like, I think it's mostly in the US just because the population is so much bigger than most countries. So it was no offense.
Well, it's weird. Like, so you're saying where you live, it's densely populated, so you're all kind of crammed together?
In the Netherlands, yeah, for sure.
Okay. Because I kind of liken that to big cities like New York or where I live, Houston. I mean, I live in the suburbs, so it's not so bad. But like you go downtown, everybody's on top of each other. And I was listening to this guy, Chase Hughes, talk about psychopaths. And he was talking about how, originally we lived in small communities and it's hard to have close relationships with more than 5 people. And so there were very small communities. So as the communities grew to these big metropolitan areas, you don't have the ability to connect with that many people. So there's like this loss of empathy. And basically his premise of the entire statement was large cities create psychopaths. So I don't know if that's kind of exclusive to the US, because I know there's plenty of incidents where people have been stabbed to death and everybody's just stepping over them. Nobody's calling the cops.
No, because they have places to be, right?
Right.
I don't think that you can compare any of our cities to that. Maybe Amsterdam. But we have those things here as well. It's just not as often, I would say. But again, I think that more has to do with the fact that we're a small country. But I think a few weeks ago, we also had somebody who stabbed a person on the train. So it definitely also happens here. I moved away from most of the big cities. Like I literally moved to the other side of the country. So I went from a town of 30,000 people to a town of 1,800, which is great. People still say hi.
Yeah.
Like, good morning. You're like, oh,
yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I definitely believe that sentiment, that you just lose connection. So I think you also devalue human life in that regard.
Yeah. Well, circling back to the book, back to Malvina, actually, Malvina isn't the central villain, but she's arguably more terrifying than Ezra because she believes in the system. Mm-hmm. Was that intentional? Was it kind of like a Stockholm syndrome?
I think I just gave her more screen time, so to say, because I wanted Ezra to be more some sort of strange entity that we don't really get to know that much about. Like, we just know a little bit about him, but we don't really know the extent he would go to. And I feel Malvina we see much more of because she lives with Ophelia, and Ophelia needs to deal with her on a daily basis. I have been asked by people if there will be a sequel, and I am thinking about it. So I might want to shed more light on his crazy personality, I would say, but then from a different perspective. So I think they're both equally nuts. I just think that we see more of Malvina because Ophelia deals mostly with her.
And do you think if Malvina had never met Ezra, would she have become someone different, or was this always in her, do you think?
I find it an interesting question because I think studies show as well that it also is really dependent on what sort of environment you grow up or that you are kind of groomed into. But I also believe that if you have a sadistic inclination, it will come out one way or the other. I just think in this environment, she actually has the option to do so without being scolded for it. She can let out her sadistic side freely because it's accepted.
Gotcha. Well, the other 2 women in the compound, Miriam and Hannah, both exhibit moments of tenderness and complicity. So, how did you want readers to feel about these women? Are they victims, survivors, or villains in their own right?
Well, Hannah definitely a villain. But Miriam, I was a little bit divided myself. So throughout the story, she does show some compassion to Ophelia in certain scenes. And the reason for that is because I kind of figured, I mean, if I would be in that situation, despite how I feel, knowing what she is heading towards, even if I wouldn't like you, I probably would still try to give you some sort of comfort. So that's why I figured, yeah, she probably would as well. And Hannah is just a special case.
We won't talk about
No.
Hannah. Well, so the cult uses very loaded words like obedience, cleansing, and submission, all to mask cruelty and righteousness. How important was language in building the psychological atmosphere of the novel?
For me, those things sort of go into hand in hand with religion, and since it has some sort of religious insight to it, I felt those words put more emphasis on what she's going through. For example, if you say to a person like, "Hey, you should listen," or you say like, "Hey, you should be obedient towards me," that those have a very different connotation to it. Whereas the latter is much stronger than if you just say, "Hey, listen," or "I need you to listen to me." So yeah, that was definitely done on purpose. The one thing I did on purpose in this book.
Everything else was just pure stream of
Just
consciousness.
go with the flow.
Well, the cult seems to have its own twisted theology and internal logic, as we were just talking about. How did you go about constructing that belief system, and were there any philosophical or religious texts in particular that influenced it?
So that literally just came from my own head. I just kind of based it on just things that I've read before, that you see on the news, stuff like that. I also felt they don't see women as equals at all, not even close to like, I mean, a dog probably has more value than a woman. So I kind of took it from that perspective. And that's also why they have their philosophy in that way. Like you as a woman should be lucky to even be considered to be in their presence, so to say. But then all under the umbrella of God.
So, you talk about being in the Bible Belt. Were you raised religious
No,
at
not at
all?
all. I do find it fascinating though. I even collect religious antiques.
Really?
Yeah, I'm definitely fascinated by religion or faith in general. I wouldn't say I believe per se. I also don't believe that there's nothing. I'm very undecided on that subject, but I definitely find it fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I'm not religious at all either. But let's say I had a gun pointed at my head and they told me I had to pick a religion. I would lean more towards the Hindu religion. I think that's fascinating because it's like they have multiple deities that all represent aspects of the universe.
Right, yeah.
What about you?
I definitely find that belief very beautiful. I've been to Bali several times, so I've witnessed it up close. So it's really nice. But I probably would lean to Christianity, I would say, simply because I used to go to Christmas Mass with my dad all the time. And I just like the peace in it. You know, the pastor would pick out something and he would just speak. And I think in the end, that's what it's about anyway. You know, just respect the people around you, give what you can, care for others. So I think that's the core of most religion anyway. So I guess in my case, I would probably go with Christianity.
Okay. When you say mass, do you mean like Catholic?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If I would probably be in the same boat with you, quite possibly, but I was not raised Catholic. I was raised in crazy fundamentalist, like
Oh.
dispensationalism, rapture type stuff where, I mean, I was almost in a cult basically. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I mean, not really a cult, but like very
Basically,
cult like behavior. Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel it's here because I live in a Reformed society. So our Bible Belt is mostly about Reformed people. I mean, they're super nice, but like at here, I live literally across the church. So like every 8 o'clock in the morning, 12, 6, 8 in the evening, the church bells go. You see people walking around all dressed nicely. You know, you need to pray, etc. So it's very yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, I think one of the aspects of building a cult is to keep a very strict structure. And the followers in your cult seem almost comforted by the rules, even as they're suffering. So, were you trying to say anything in particular about the human need for structure, even when it's harmful?
I think we all thrive in what we know. I mean, there's a reason why they say that discomfort is growth. And there's also a reason why most people do what they do. They stay at the same job, they stay at the same place, or they don't want to move elsewhere. They stay in relationships that they're not happy about. I think we are biologically inclined to stay with what we know, even if it's harmful to us.
The devil, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird how the surety, if that's a word.
I'm going with it. I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, so if it's not, I've coined it today. The surety of a bad situation seems to be more comfortable than the unpredictable nature of taking a chance on something, like
100%.
taking a different job. Yeah.
Publishing a book.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, how does the saying go? Fortune favors the bold.
Could very well be. I will believe you in an instant.
Yeah.
You can tell me anything.
Well, if it's not, that I've coined that too,
Okay,
but
nice.
I don't think I did. Well, the lair or compound has a surreal, oppressive physical presence.
Mhm.
Can you talk about how you imagine the setting and how it serves as an extension of Ezra's control?
Yeah, so I'm a huge nerd. So I used to play a lot of D&D. I like Lord of the Rings, stuff like that. So I kind of took that from there, as if you're like in a dungeon. So I was just envisioning it like, okay, if they are walking around, like how would it look like? Like how would it be built? I was also thinking of the dwarves, of how they build up everything underground. So I was like, it's possible. I mean, I know it's fancy, it doesn't matter, like it's possible. So I kind of took it from there. And control wise, I mean, yeah, if you're underground, where are you gonna go? I mean, if it's a huge maze that you're not familiar with, how are you gonna escape? You won't. I would get lost because I would have no idea where to go. So I think from that aspect, I would definitely say, because it's underground, at least in my head, it was like a huge maze. And I would probably say maybe somewhere like in the center, you would have that specific scene that it occurred there. But yeah, that's kind of how I figured it out. It's, for me, it was just more from a fantasy perspective, like how would it look like? I would make it like that.
Gotcha. Well, we were talking about, I believe, if I remember correctly, we were talking about the objectification of women. So you write about the body in the way that strips away ownership and dignity. So was that a commentary on objectification or more about identity being dismantled and rebuilt?
I think both. I mean, if you strip a person in general of their autonomy, there's nothing left. That means it's easier to break their spirits. And once you've broken their spirits, you can give them a new identity. So I would say both, for sure.
Well, were there scenes in Eternal Wives that were particularly difficult to write, either emotionally or technically? Do you ever have like a creative hangover?
I do have those. I don't have difficulty writing them at all. I think my biggest issue is that I doubt often whether it's extreme enough, if it's bloody enough, if it's gory enough, because for me it's kind of like, is this not too boring? I should add something more. So I think that's more my biggest issue, that I always have a hard time determining whether it's gruesome enough. And I also therefore find it funny when I then read reviews and people are like, oh my God, like this is disgusting. And I'm like, really? Oh, okay, nice. I was scared you guys might find it boring or something.
Because I could have gone so much further.
Yeah, like I sometimes even ask friends, and I'm like, hey, I remember with my first book, and I asked one of her friends, I was like, can I call this horror? And she was like, this is extreme horror. And I was like, are you certain? Are you sure? And she was like, yes, I am sure. She was like, this is nasty. And I was like, oh. Really though? It's just like, yes, it's nasty. Okay. And I have that with all my books. I find it very difficult to determine whether I had the same with Ingest Me. I was like, I hope people will not find this boring. And then people are just like, I cannot even eat while I read this. And I'm like, oh, then I did a good job.
So you never, like I've talked to authors of extreme horror that sometimes, I don't know if it's, I think it's both. It's either a particular scene or just they've been working on like abject terror, depravity for so long that they eventually have to stop and get like an emotional palate cleanser. Like I think Judith Sonnet told me that she watches The Munsters, that old,
Yeah.
it's an old black and white sitcom, I guess, basically. So you never need that. You're just like, oh no, I don't know if it's brutal enough.
I don't know. Maybe I'm ruined.
No, no,
And
no,
probably
no.
I have a background in content moderation since I was 19. So when the internet was like unfiltered, so I've seen too much. I think that's my biggest issue. Like, I'll write, and after this, I'll just pick up another extreme horror to read. I'll read several at a time, and I'm working on a dark romantasy as well. And one of my beta readers was like, "This leans a lot to horror," and I was like, "Oh." I said, "But I really want to, make people understand that the world is depraved." And she was like, "Yeah, no, we get that. That was very clear." And I was like, "Oh, so I can help myself, I guess." Because for me, I was like, "Oh, but this is pretty tame and this is super nice and people will get the gist." And she was like, "This is horrible in a good way, but like this is leading to extreme." And I was like, "Oh, well."
Yeah.
So I guess it's just my what you said.
Is it just kind of like, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a guilty pleasure, like, some sick fun, or do you find like catharsis in it in any way?
I do find it very therapeutic to write, also because, for example, Support Body, it has things that are based on true events that I saw and witnessed myself. Ingest Me is based on stuff that I've seen myself. So in a way, for me, I guess it's getting a little bit out of my system, I would say, turn it into something fun for other people, so they can join in my.
So you're kind of like the Marquis de Sade in his plays.
I mean.
Well, you did a great job of leaving the reader in complete suspense as to what Ophelia was going to be subjected to next. And when we finally find out, it is more intense, violent, and sometimes bizarre than you can ever imagine. So, I mean, I know that we've been talking about stream of consciousness and that, your only issue is like, oh, I don't know, is it brutal enough? I don't want people to be bored. The question was going to be, where did you come up with the more bizarre or inventive elements? Are those the result of you sitting there like, now, wait a minute, did I go far enough?
I would say so, yeah. I like, I'll write stuff out and then I'm kind of looking and I'm like, this could be worse, right? How could I make this worse? And then I just start to think of like, because I read a lot myself as well, so I also try to be a little bit creative with the things that I do. Not always, of course, because sometimes, I mean, pop an eye or something, that's always one for fun. But yeah, for example, the scene with Malvina, it just came up and I was like, man, this would be crazy. And then my first idea was to just have her walk. And then I thought, no, 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 because he's pissed at her. So we need to make this worse. And so I made it worse.
Oh, yes, you did.
So
No
it
spoilers.
really comes from that aspect. And then again, like I said, I've also seen a lot of stuff on the internet. So I also know how creative people can be. So I guess from that background, I just see if I can top that. And it seems I've succeeded in that, so that's nice.
Absolutely. So, and if this is too personal, like just tell me to move on, but you keep on like inserting little bits of what your profession or what you've done in the past as a profession. And it's getting me curious. So have you had to, what would be the word, sift through media looking for illegal stuff like snuff films and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Really? So you've seen, wow.
And worse.
Oh, that's intense.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. At the same time, I guess I now can use it in a creative manner, I would
Mhm.
say.
And as we said, kind of purge it out.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, I'm not affected by it. I used to be, but again, I mean, I was 19, so what do I know at that age? But now I'm
How do you think that's affected your worldview? Are you like borderline nihilistic or
I don't know what nihilistic means.
it's a branch of philosophy where basically, simply put, there's no objective meaning in anything.
um, no, but I definitely think I do look at things differently. Also, due to certain life experiences, I look at things differently in life. But I would say not per se in a bad way. But for example, I will not quickly befriend a person. I will keep my distance until I actually kind of figure you out, or at least when I think I figured you out. That will be my first step to maybe be a little bit more personal with you. So I think if anything, it more affected me in that sense, I would say.
So more of an awareness that regardless of your initial impression of somebody, they're always capable of harboring darkness. So you need to not necessarily trust, but watch.
I would say, yeah, 100%. Like I said, also personal life experience things. It just, I mean, you always evolve as a human being, right? You constantly experience things in life and you constantly tweak yourself positively, negatively. I mean, certain things can happen that make you maybe more receptive to certain things. And of course, also things can happen that makes you take a step back. So yeah, for sure.
Gotcha. Well, looking back, is there anything you would approach differently if you were writing Eternal Wives today?
I would say maybe a little bit more world building, maybe give a little bit more background. But I mean, and then again, that's what sequels are for, right? So I guess that will be the only thing. I have the tendency to write, at least I think, pretty fast paced. And I think part of me also kind of feels like if I put too much information, it might take away from the story or it might slow the story down, which would not per se be a bad thing. But I kind of feel with, especially with extreme horror, you kind of want to keep people on their toes. Like, I don't want people to be like, oh, you're now telling me a lot about how the compound looks like. Oh, this is boring. Let me just skip those pages. Like, I just want people to be like, she did what now? No. What are you doing? No. That's kind of how I want people to read the books, to just be like, this is insane. I need the next page. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, again, like I said, I could have maybe give a little bit more background on certain things, but I didn't. So I'm not the type of person that's gonna dwell on that, like, oh, maybe I should have done this, maybe I should have done that. Like I said, I mean, I'm thinking about a possible sequel, and I can always use that to maybe build out that world a little bit more. I don't know, maybe even turn it into a series because I do think it has potential, but let's see how that goes.
So keeping the action going and not so much having scenes like Ophelia felt the coldness of the concrete floor against her skin and
Well, only if her skin is
stuff.
scraped and hurt, then it makes sense to me to add
Yes,
that.
yes, yes,
If it brings discomfort, yeah,
yes.
it makes definitely sense. But if she's
Yeah.
just gonna sit and be like, "Oh, my feet are cold on the floor," it's like, yeah,
Hmm.
well,
Not to
usually,
wax poetic.
yeah.
Gotcha. Well, the name Ophelia was an interesting choice. There is a character in the play Hamlet, and because of its Shakespearean origin, the name often carries connotations of tragic beauty, mental instability, or emotional fragility, and innocence corrupted by a cruel world. So, how much of that, if any, would you say is reflected in Ophelia's character and story arc?
So I would say, funnily enough, all of them. But then again, I've never read Hamlet. I had no association with Shakespeare at all. I just really liked the name Ophelia. I was actually deciding between Ophelia or between Odette because I like both names. But then I felt Ophelia felt a little bit more biblical to me. So that's why I actually went with that name. I
Well, it's a beautiful name.
Yeah,
So,
100%. I love it.
yeah.
So that's why I was kind of like, you know what, the time is right. This character is going to be named Ophelia. It fits for my idea, at least with the general feeling of the story. So that's why I actually picked that name. But what you just described, I would say she definitely overlaps with those things. The naivety of just meeting a man and just feel like that he is going to solve your problems. and just decide to get up and leave everything that you know to follow this individual into the unknown. I think that's tragic in itself.
Well, so for some reason, the brutality against women and the spiritual connotations applied to it by the villain reminded me of one of my favorite movies, Martyrs. So I was curious to know, have you seen the film? And I know you said the inspiration was partly Sister Wives, but if you've seen this film, do you think the story was consciously or possibly unconsciously inspired by it?
So I've never seen the movie.
No. You need to change that.
I want to watch it. Like, it's on my watch list, but I have a hard time watching horror movies because they give me nightmares.
Really?
Yeah, especially
all of the real stuff you've seen in fiction gives you nightmares?
Especially zombie. I don't touch it with a stick. Like, keep it away from me. I don't want to look at it. I am now trying to watch. So recently I watched Spit on My Grave, which is also a classic, but I've only watched it recently because a friend of mine was like, "Girl, you cannot be writing this stuff and not have seen these movies." So she is now slowly going to, during the day, not at night, during the day, so I can still, I don't know, watch Twilight or something to calm my brain. And so I really want to see Martyrs. I just haven't gotten to it. So in that sense, no, it's not influenced by it because I don't even know what it's about. I just know that it's gruesome and extreme, which is the sole reason why I want to watch it. So
yeah, and the reason that it reminded me of it is because, and let me clarify, the 2008 original by Pascal Laugier, not the, I think there was like a 2015 American remake, the original French one. But, you know, a young woman is just tortured. And at some point, you eventually get to the point where you're just like, why am I watching this gratuitous violence? Like, I think something's wrong with me, because you can't really figure out why it's happening. It just seems gratuitous. And then at the end, everything that you've been watching that you don't understand is all sewed up in like 2 minutes. And it hits you like a ton of bricks. It's just insane.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, definitely intrigued. I mean, like I said, I do want to see it. I actually spoke about it this afternoon with my friend. I was like, hey, we should watch Martyrs. And she was like, I haven't seen it either. So she was like, yeah, let's get to it. So it's definitely on my to-do list.
That and a Serbian film. Have you heard about a Serbian film?
Yeah, I've seen that years ago.
Did you see the uncut, like the...
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I was like 20 or something. Like, that's almost 20 years ago. So I barely remember it. I watched it because my colleague was like, oh, this is sick. Like, you should watch it. This is definitely up your alley. So I watched it, and yeah.
A Serbian film was depraved.
Yeah.
But Martyrs is brutal and just like psychological. Once the big reveal happens, it's just like, I mean, it hits you in the head like, holy shit.
I like that better. So, yeah.
yeah. You'll definitely like Martyrs much better than Serbian film. Anyway.
Yes.
Well, so when you're writing something this emotionally and physically raw, how do you know when a scene is finished? You know, like you've hit the emotional note you intended. Okay, now we transition.
That's a really good question. I am not sure if I have an answer, though. So what I usually do is I write a story and I call it a skeleton. And then I just let it sit for a few days and I revisit it to flesh it out further. So sometimes I will just write stuff that even if I'm a little bit like, well, this should happen here, but I just can't really get it out. I will just write some one-liners. And then like a few days later, I will just write something awful. And I guess it's just some sort of feeling that I have with it, that I kind of feel like, oh, this is now closed for me. Like, this feels sufficient. So I find a difficult question to answer because I don't really have a specific... I think it's just a feeling that I have that I'm like, well, you're done now. You suffered enough. Like, it's okay. We can move on to the next thing.
You take pity on the character?
No. But at least at that moment, I'm like, you know what? You can take a breather. Let's move on to the next thing.
If we keep moving, you may not survive, and I need you alive at least a little bit longer. So. Yeah, gotcha. Well, do you ever include moments specifically designed to make the reader question their own morality or complicity while they read it?
100%. I kind of like it when books kind of mess with your head. I'll keep it clean. And I think the one that did it most was Support Body. And it was also my sole intent when I wrote that book. I think with Eternal Wives, it was less present, but with Support Body for sure, especially because, of course, the main character is already questionable. I like it when a book makes you think, when you're kind of like, huh, I am supposed to hate this type of character, or I shouldn't feel any emotions for this type of character, or they're doing this, but I can actually understand where they're coming from. Like, what does it say about me? So, yeah, I definitely like to. That's why I think I like with villains or whatever you want to call them to give them some sense of humanity that you almost feel bad for understanding where they're coming from.
Yeah.
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 I like to do that for sure.
Well, as I said before, what kind of turned me on to you and your work was a review of your book Support Buddy by the book talker Veronica. And I started reading it and thought about maybe discussing that book. But then I was like, if we dive into Support Buddy, I don't think even if I set it for 18 above, YouTube would I think they would kill it as soon as I tried to upload it.
Yeah.
So I was like, the most recent book is out. Let's
Let's
just
focus on
go
that
with
one.
that. But yeah. But Support Buddy covers some very taboo subject matter, which I admire in a writer as being fearless. So, do you see writing about taboo or uncomfortable subjects as a responsibility, a challenge, or simply a creative instinct?
I would definitely go with the latter. Like, I don't see it as a responsibility at all. I do feel, which again probably has to do with my background, that people can be very short sighted, especially in this taboo subject. It's funny because somebody mentioned the book in a video and it went kind of viral. It went over 1 million views. And she summed up the book as I don't know if I can say the word, but people call it PDF file, whatever you want to call it, but then with a conscience. And it was insane to me how triggered people were by just that sentence. Because a lot of people were like, no, this is contradicting. They cannot have a conscience, this, blah, blah, blah. And for me, it's like, what do you mean they cannot have a conscience? They're human beings. We can always have a conscience regardless of your interest, I would say. And what is it? I think 2 or 3% of each population has people with those feelings. You've probably crossed them numerous times without even knowing it. And it could even be one of your best friends without you knowing it. So this one I had more research on in the sense of from when I was younger, like I've read a lot of interviews with people with these sort of feelings and how lonely it was to never be able to speak to another person about it because you will be shunned most likely. And that always kind of made me think like, what would I do? What would I do if the person I've trusted most because they are my best friends and all of a sudden they come to you and they say like, hey, I have to share this with you. What would I do? And my honest answer would be like, I don't know. I have no idea what I would do. So for me, that was a very interesting part of the premise. And these sort of people speaking on those sort of events actually happen. They do work with these sort of organizations. So for me, that was an interesting kickoff of the story. Like, okay, so you kind of have like this, you already feel guilty about what you are. Then you kind of have this epiphany of like being a savior type of person. And then you're kind of like, shit, my whole world is going to go to ruins. Like, what have I done? And then I
Yeah.
kind of figured, well, why would they let you go? Maybe this woman is not that nice. And then it kind of spiraled from there. Yeah. Like I said, so it's more from a creative point of view, I would say.
So you were saying it was online, a viral, you said TikTok?
Yeah. So she
Yeah.
made a message about the most 5 effed up books that she read that month. And Support Buddy was one of them. And she put one-liners for each book to describe the book. So of course you have a lot of people who don't even read extreme horror. They don't even read the book. They just read that one line and they just start judging you like crazy people. And For me, that says more about that person than what I've been writing, so to say, because it's not glorifying anything. I think on the contrary.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. What was it? American Psycho. Bret Easton Ellis had to clarify it's not promoting misogyny, it's portraying it,
yeah,
I think. Yeah, something like that. Because he got a lot of backlash for that book.
yeah,
And
I can imagine.
I mean, yeah.
Especially in that time sense. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, what is the life of Lesley Camphouse like outside of writing?
So I read a lot. That's one. I like to collect things. I'm a huge hoarder. Well, you can already see it in my background. I
Yeah.
collect figurines and whatnot, but I also collect oddities and taxidermy, religious antiques. So my living room is completely stuffed with that. And I think those really are my main interests besides writing right now. So reading a lot and just busy doing that sort of things, like just collecting. I have a different account for my oddities. I like to go to conventions, comic cons, oddity conventions, that sort of stuff. And for the rest, I'm a pretty boring person, to be honest. So that's really my main things, I would say. Yeah.
Gotcha. Sounds like a good time to me. Well, Lesley, it has been a pleasure talking with you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you as well. Thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. Well, as we bring the show to a close, is there anything you'd like to plug or let your readers know about?
I think the only thing I would like to let them know is that I'm planning on releasing Roll for Initiative in May, which is exactly about what you think it is. Tabletop RPG, but make it gruesome. And I'm planning on releasing In Just Me 2 in June.
All right, sounds good. Well, listeners at home, all links are in the description. And Lesley, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday for a new episode featuring the best and brightest authors and filmmakers of dark literature and film. So until then, stay healthy, stay sane, and as always, thank you for listening. See you next time.